Hey guys, welcome back to Caviar Conversations with Dr. Noya. Today we are doing our first solo episode, so it's just me, myself, and I. For those of you that don't know, I have Caviar Skin Clinic. It is one of the Medi spas in Yaletown and also a skincare company called Caviar Care. And today I kind of just gonna go with the flow. I feel like it's 2025 now and we're in our first month, and a few themes have just been coming into my life, and I just feel like why not chat about them right now. And one of those is like perfectionism and kind of striving for perfection. I feel like this is something that I have struggled with in the past when I was in school, because you get graded and you compare those grades to other people around you. And I feel like during that time in my life, that's also when health and fitness took a huge role. And I did a few like fitness competitions. They were like bikini. So you're not actually performing like athletic like workouts or sport in that way. But basically, you're showcasing off your like months to years of hard work to achieve a certain physique. And I feel like every woman and probably most males as well, at some point in time. But I think women have a little bit more pressure in terms of like dieting and healthy lifestyle, that we go through a very strict phase in our life where kind of our worth is tied to how we look and our bodies. And I feel like that was very prevalent around that time. So I was in naturopathic medical school and I had just started. So I had already done a fitness competition and I was training for the second one, and it was a huge undertaking. And in naturopathic medical school, so to get into the program, you have to have a degree, and then of course you need to meet a lot of those science requisites as well. So everybody that has come to this program, not only do they already have a degree, so they are like the 1% of people that have finished the degree and have chosen to further their education. So you're dealing with a lot of like type A personalities. And what I found in the first year naturopath school, once the like high of like, oh my God, I'm in a industry that I love and it's so amazing, I kind of started to notice that I was always like comparing myself to everybody else. There was always a girl that was like eating healthier and being so diligent with her like organic kale smoothies, and who was like super petite and tiny and doing Pilates 5 days a week, and also, getting A pluses. And I remember at that time, I felt I was comparing myself the most to other people. And of course, when you do that, it's a complete death trap. There's always somebody or on the outside that it's going to look like it's easier for them. And I always kind of felt like, why is it so easy for them? Like, how do they maintain their weight during school and they're eating organic and they seem to be able like come into school no problem, do the exams, and they don't seem that they look stressed or not. Of course, what I realized later on is everyone definitely has their own stresses and has their way of like showing it or hiding it. And that kind of took over my life, I would say, for a good 2.5 years of the program, where I was constantly comparing myself to people. And in doing that, you're actually lowering kind of your vibration and yourself, because you're pretty much telling your subconscious that they have something that you don't. But the only reason you see that in somebody else is because you actually do possess it. So if I turn around and say, oh my God, that girl's so beautiful, like I'm not pretty, why she's so pretty, I'm only noticing and appreciating her beauty because a part of me knows that I have beauty myself in my own way. It doesn't have to be like in the exact same form. Somebody might be very like aesthetically beautiful, and somebody else might, sing very beautifully, and it can be very captivating. But in your own way, you also possess beauty. That's why you notice it and appreciate it in somebody else. And it's kind of a technique that I've learned over the last 5 years from a mentor, that if you notice something in someone, instead of putting them on a pedestal and kind of like idolizing them, which we do this so often naturally, we don't even realize we're doing this, is you say, okay, where do I have that too? And that way, instead of putting somebody like above you, like we do this to celebrities a lot, like, oh my God, this celebrity is so beautiful and she's gorgeous and, she has the best life ever. And we're basically like, in a small way, unconsciously shitting on ourselves a bit, that our life is not as good and we're not as pretty and we don't have as much like fame or richness or purpose and fulfillment. So we always like in the practice find when you catch yourself kind of putting somebody on a pedestal for a characteristic or trait, that you also just stop and catch yourself and then ask yourself like where do I have that too? Like where do I possess a beauty, or where do I possess like freedom and like a free spirit mentality, if that's something you're idolizing? Or oh my god, that person like doesn't even have to work. Like in what areas do I have like ease and like less effort needed in things? And the more that we can kind of train our mind to not feed that cycle, because we are not our thoughts and we don't have to believe our thoughts. But when we start getting emotional on our thoughts is when we start believing it and they start to run our lives. And sure, it can be a positive thing, but oftentimes with human nature, it can be negative as well and kind of spiral us into kind of depression or anxiety and like creating judgments of ourselves. And so that's just a small practice that I do that has really helped against kind of the anxiety and stuff that comes with perfection, because there's always somebody that you feel is doing it better. There's always someone that you feel has it easier in life or that had a step up. And I find in starting a business, for me, now my mentality, like I would say I have like evolved my cells and I am a completely different person, or have evolved much of that from who I was 10 years ago. Of course, naturally we mature and we grow and through our life experiences, but I put a lot of effort, energy, time, investment into looking in that mirror and doing some self-reflection. And I find these are some habits that I keep up today to maintain that as well, because it's so easy to fall back into our old thought patterns. And there is some comfort in that as well. Though I find these little tips and tricks are always good. So when you notice that you're kind of putting someone on a pedestal, and this can happen even when you're like first dating someone, like, oh my God, they're so perfect. Like they have everything. And you just start like creating this fantasy of who you think they are or who you want them to be. But that's not even real. And you kind of do yourself a disservice later, because when you realize after, a few months that they are human, they aren't perfect, then you can create a lot of like disappointment for yourself. And the same thing with business. I find now my attitude is like, even if it's like half finished or like only 70% of the way, just put it out there, because getting that feedback from people and that feedback in the world can be very motivating and inspiring to keep going. Or if you need to make adjustments, those adjustments when you've put in 70%. It can be sometimes really devastating, or part of that perfectionism where we want something to be so perfect. Say we're creating a product and it's like, oh no, it's not ready, or it's a little off, or I want to change something. And you could literally spend years and even a lifetime trying to develop the perfect product, which perfect doesn't exist, and you haven't even put it out there. And it could be something where you end up never putting it out there, because if you're a perfectionist, like nothing is ever going to be good enough for you. And you kind of just have to work with your own construct or belief system around that. And one thing I think that's very courageous of entrepreneurs and people that do end up having their own company or starting their own company, whether successful or not, is like the courage it takes to just put yourself out there and get the feedback. You might be pleasantly surprised that people are like, wow, I really like your product. And even though, yes, you should definitely like seek validation, maybe just from yourself internally and have more intrinsic, still you can enjoy the validation you get from a complete stranger that buys your product and leaves you a good review and likes it. Like that's amazing, because you think, of course, your friends are going to support you, but friends you can also utilize to get honest feedback and say, hey, like, yes, tell me the things that you like, and that's great and that's so inspiring, but I want you to really be honest with me. What are the things that you would do differently? Or if this was your company, what would you change? Or what do you think? And getting that feedback is a very courageous thing to do. And I do encourage people to put themselves out there. Like anybody that works with me at Caviar Skin Clinic, I always say, like, be willing and be open to feedback. You might have somebody that wasn't quite happy with your work, but wouldn't you rather know about it than later have a bunch of bad reviews or a bunch of people like not coming back to you, but you've never known why? It's better to like embrace that. And we all want to be better and we all want to grow and get that feedback. It's not always easy to hear, though. I think most people don't want to be like rude. Most people actually want to like be kind, like they liked you and they resonated with you and they connected with you and your brand, so they want to support you. And usually they want to do it in a nice way. It's only when people feel like they're not heard, or they were like dismissed, or misunderstood, that maybe it kind of escalates into like anger or a complaint. But I think most of the time people are open to giving feedback and doing it kindly. If they felt like, of course, like a front desk person or admin or a customer service person like dismissed them, that's when I think people get really angry and frustrated and upset. And then they feel they have to yell and kind of be rude for them to be heard. But in most cases, if you can create like a safe space in receiving feedback, and what that looks like in a practical sense, because I do like kind of giving people practical tools that they can use on their own, because we can all talk about this and like, ooh, accept feedback. But for some people, and for me, it used to be like very terrifying. Like, I would rather like the old me would just completely avoid a situation. And yes, sometimes I have those tendencies now because we get so wrapped up in our head. And sometimes we start overthinking. Though, really, how to create that safe space is to kind of picture like the worst case scenario feedback, and start writing down like what would be the most like mortifying feedback to receive. And I write those all out like pen and paper so that you kind of have clarity. And then I put a little bit of music on and I start picturing if that were to really happen. And I start picturing like, oh my God, somebody is going to like bash me and like say all these negative things. And then I picture that and I kind of work through what is the outcome that I'd like to create. So in a scenario like that, like what is my goal? If my goal is to have like peace with the person, and my goal is to like receive honest feedback and be able to like thank them for that, and any stepping stone that's helped me take one level up to my business, I think that's like a very valuable insight. So for me to get the outcome that I want, I can't like dismiss a patient or say, no, that's just you, or that's just your problem, or that's just your skin. I really say like, hey, I'm really interested to hear the feedback because it does actually really help me grow. And everybody's a little bit different. So everyone has different feedback. So I would really love to hear what you have to say. And I'm very open to hearing what you have to say. So please, like, let me know what's going on. And I feel like when you kind of come at it for an open way where you've almost like set up the tone that, hey, I would like to hear feedback, and I'm open to hearing it, people then feel like, okay, now they almost get scared to even share with you now because they're like, oh my God, this person's so nice. I don't want to hurt their feelings. But creating it that way allows them to say it in a nice way. Like, you can give feedback to someone to be like, hey, I tried your product. What I noticed is I opened the cap, it kind of sliced my finger. It was kind of pretty annoying. But sure, maybe it was my clumsy fault. And I also find maybe the product was a little bit greasy for my skin, but I have oily skin. And I think saying product like that is like saying feedback like that is so much more digestible for people, than having to hear like, this product sucked. I tried to call customer service. They didn't talk to me. I would never use them again. Buyer beware. And you get something like that and you're like, oh my God, there's like a pit in my stomach. So I think being open and like, instead of like hiding and running away from it, encouraging people to give you feedback, you'd be actually like quite surprised that not only are you going to receive some feedback where you can improve, but people are going to also share like the positives. They're going to want to share where they did like that product or service. And that can be very like rewarding, and you kind of understand things from your customer or patient's perspective. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes you just got to do the brave thing and put yourself out there, which isn't easy. But that's kind of advice that I would give for anybody that's looking to like start a business or branch off on their own or offer a service on their own or like offer a new service, is to really get back that feedback and then also just like put it out there. It doesn't have to be like 1,000% perfect, and you don't have to think it's 1,000% perfect. Most people, I find, put something out there and yeah, we're insecure about it. Of course we are. We want the world to like it and embrace it, and we want people to receive it well. But you can't make 100% of people happy. And I think if you go into that, really, if you had 10% of customers coming back that were repeat, you can sustain a really nice business for yourself. And that's like your niche that you'll discover that you target. But if you never put yourself out there, you won't always even discover what your niche is. Because sometimes you'd be surprised, like what kind of customer is receptive to that marketing. And I feel like right now, this is kind of what I'm discovering with our skincare is, I wanted to just come out with one line for one kind of condition. And I chose like peptides as like one of my favorite ingredients. And it's kind of just about getting feedback and getting people out there. And it's actually surprising what avenues that are the most receptive. And I always even I'm kind of messaging the marketing team or my partner, like, oh my God, we got a bunch of sales like in North Carolina. Like something's going well in the East Coast. We're really resonating with that demographic. And so you're getting a lot of like feedback. And I kind of want to go into the story a little bit about like Caviar Care. So we've had Caviar Skin Clinic, or I've had Caviar Skin Clinic for 3.5 years now since we officially opened. But for those of you that knew me from before that, I had a tiny little room and a few blocks away where I was treating some patients. And I took the plunge to open a clinic, which has been absolutely fabulous. And I've loved for me, what I love the most is connecting with people and connecting with my patients. And I love instilling like confidence from the inside and outside. Of course, confidence is like an inner thing, but I think you can achieve that also with external things. Like we, eat healthy and work out, and that is also like an improvement externally on our physique and internally how we feel, and that can improve confidence. And then my idea with Caviar Care. So Caviar Care, I started with my significant other, and we would always be chatting in our relationship like, hey, we want to start something that's like a product. And this has been something that was already on the back of my mind while I was in school. And I kind of was thinking more along the lines of like maybe makeup. And my partner had been thinking about some things as well, some different products, but nothing was like 100% clear. So when we started chatting and talking about it, it kind of started to evolve like, okay, it makes sense to do something associated with the clinic. Like I feel like that's my, bread and butter, and that's my baby. And I love it so much. And because I get so much like fulfillment and satisfaction from my interactions with patients, I was like, okay, why not do some type of extension where people all over the world can have a little bit of like caviar in their vanity or their makeup case. And so we decided to take the plunge and work together. And of course, it's never easy. Anyone knows that relationships are difficult as it is, and it takes a lot of work from both people. Also, entrepreneurship is very difficult, though. I saw this Instagram the other day, and it was super interesting because it was saying couples that start a business together or do something together in that realm have a lower divorce rate. It was like about 4%. Now, I'm not sure what study they quoted. This was just a video I saw on Instagram, and I thought that was interesting. And I actually like sat and thought about that, and I was like, it makes sense. You are asking a lot of tough questions. You have to be like super honest and real about finances. You have to trust the other person in finances because you're opening bank accounts together. You have a company card together. You're deciding like what's the budget for purchasing things. How much budget are we going to do towards marketing? Do we agree with the same vision, the same branding style? And how are we going to grow that like mastermind team to work with us? So we took a lot of thought in kind of deciding how we wanted to do things. What roles would we do? Like, where is somebody's strong suit? And one thing that was really interesting when we had the perfect hoop here, we had Haley and Diana, and theirs flowed very synergistically because they are opposites in that way. Where Haley is really great on the marketing end, Diana loves the back end. So it fit really well. But sometimes like both people are, more extroverted or more wanting to communicate like on a customer base or on a business base. So we had to really decide where are we going to put our individual time, and then where are we going to work together, to kind of work through on that. So it's always a, perpetual evolution with things. And it's been really cool to see over time. And I really have to say, I applaud people for taking the plunge and going in together with somebody that they know. And this can be like in a relationship or in a friendship, because definitely it is a risk. And I think the reward is so worth it because you get to share those successes with somebody that you care about, and somebody that's in your life. And every time like a little sale pops up, it's like, yay, like what we did worked. And we always get to like share and do that little like cheers and high five of what that works. And for us, we had to experiment and put things out there. And we've changed our branding from where we started. And it is a lot of work. And I think once you curate an idea and you put it out there and get the feedback, then you're that much closer to having a brand that's like such a strong representation of yourself. And so, definitely for those of you that have ideas and things out there, I definitely would encourage you to just kind of test it out a little bit. You don't have to know where the final destination is or what you want to do or what your platform is. That can change. Like, I thought Instagram was going to be it and was going to be the number one because it was that for Caviar Skin Clinic. But surprisingly, I'm finding other avenues are actually more fruitful and more resourceful. Whereas, Instagram, there's a lot of competition. We've got a bunch of brands at Sephora. We've got a bunch of influencers promoting brands. And there's just a lot going on right now. So how do you create a brand that's new? It's not celebrity backed, we're not the Hailey Biebers and the Selena Gomez to back up a brand. So how do you kind of put yourself out there and build a following? And I think really it just starts with that niche. It'll start with that one customer and then two and then three. And the more you can understand those customers that you do get, especially those initial ones that were so brave and you love those ones because even before you were a thing, they believed in your product and liked it so much to purchase it. And so that's where a lot of your power can come from is seeing and talking to and getting feedback from those initial customers because those are the leaders in trends, the ones that didn't wait for everybody to get on the bandwagon. So there can be so much valuable and value in those first 10 customers that come in. And now with all the data we have, it's great. I mean, by no means do I have any idea how to read all that stuff. I let the marketing team like digest all of that for me. You can't be an expert in everything, though I just kind of focus where my strong suit is. And for things like that, I do love doing like the photo shoots and the creative design. So, for anyone that is struggling with like perfectionism or they have an idea but have just been too scared to put it out there, like it's okay. Like, this is how you build resilience and build that muscle of courageousness because that fear is always going to be there. That anxiety is always going to be there. It never goes away. And the more your company is valued at and the more customers you have, like that anxiety can sometimes be bigger because there's more people that you don't want to disappoint and you have more pressure to deliver a certain standard. And with today's day, we all know that people have a strong voice. So things can either be propelled really fast, really quickly in a positive, or you can be a little bit thrown back with some feedback. But I think things come in a business like every few months, there is some type of conflict or kind of big fire that can either push your business forward and propel it forward or kind of push it back or stagnate if you get a little bit like discouraged or fearful. So I think just doing it in baby steps is where you like really develop that muscle of like confidence and trust in yourself that sure, something may not be perfect or you may not have the answer or some people like it, some people are neutral about it, but that's all information that you can get. And that's information can go into curating a next product or further developing a product you have. And I think it works in the service industry as well. And I use a lot of these techniques for Caviar Skin Clinic in getting feedback because again, everybody's body's different, everybody heals differently. Though learning how to communicate that and get the feedback of what people like and what their style is. Like, are you more conservative? Or, I mean, with Botox, it's like very easy because people will say, I don't want to look weird. I don't want to be frozen. I want to look natural. I want movement. I don't really want everybody to know. So then you're going to take a little bit more of a conservative approach. Whereas then you have your kind of queen energy that's like, I know what I want and I want it frozen and this is what I want and that's it. Then for them, you're going to go a little bit more of the frozen route. And so again, you have the same product, but you've created now like two different services with that, one for a more natural approach, one for a little bit more frozen or a dramatic approach. And sometimes with products, you'll either decide to stick within your niche, or you decide, hey, like in skincare, most companies have like multiple product lines for different conditions, whether you have oily skin, sensitive skin, acne prone skin, pigmentation, or dullness. And I think that's where I've seen at least I can speak for Caviar Skin Clinic, where we have evolved the most is kind of getting that feedback and then customizing things for the person in front of us, who has individual and unique needs. And it's been pretty cool, even with the podcast, to see other companies and kind of hear the ins and outs of their story and where they have thrived. And we can kind of look mechanically at like, okay, these are the things that they've like physically done A, B, C, D to get to where they are. But there's also this like energy that's a little bit deeper and more kind of this fire underneath, that has made them really successful. And I think everybody does have that fire inside, and it looks a little bit different. So there can be 10 different clinics, but they all have a little bit of a different vibe or energy and attract somebody else. So when people do say an industry is saturated, sure, it can be saturated, but you can always create your new niche in that, because people are unique and have different needs. So you don't have to try to be the company that does everything or treats everyone. But say you had 1,000 customers and you want to just really cater to that niche of 1,000 customers, then that's going to create a wicked brand today. And it almost seems like a lot of those brands are really skyrocketing and doing really well. There was one company I've been like kind of following lately, who did really well, and it's this perfume line called Who's Elijah. And I was following their story. So it's a couple that started it, and in Australia, and they kind of went the wholesale route and at the boutique stores, and kind of that was their journey, and where they kind of got popular. And now that has changed, and they're kind of aiming for more Sephora. And kind of trying to niche that way. So things grow. But if they didn't go out there and put themselves out in those boutiques to get that feedback, the company could have taken a whole different turn, or they wouldn't have been able to become as successful. So I always say, like, kind of overcome a little bit of that perfectionism by seeing like where do you have that, where you maybe compliment someone or put them on a pedestal, and slowly building that muscle of just being courageous and putting yourself out there. And it can start with friends and family, or some people would rather get info or like get feedback from people they don't know. Like sometimes that's easier, because sometimes friends can be too honest and you're not always like necessarily prepared for that, though I think that's an awesome thing to do. And now, because we are in January, I feel like this has been a time of like vision boards, and all my friends that I've been talking to, they've like set time to make a new vision board or kind of journal and things like that. And I haven't gotten around to it yet, but this is kind of, I do have a vision board already, and I've kind of looked at where some things have come true, which is really awesome. Like I feel like a lot of the traveling and the trips and those memories have been created. And then there's a part where I feel like is just starting. And so for me, this month I'm going to take some time to make a vision board. And you know what's crazy? I went to Shoppers the other day because I was going to buy a bunch of magazines, because I kind of like the idea of just cutting things out, and the paper quality of magazines. And I literally couldn't believe that magazines were like $20. And I was like, okay, I need a lot of magazines for my vision board, and they're so thin now. So I'm like, I'm going to have to go the like printing route and printing a bunch of photos to cut out and crop and paste. I personally like the hand to paper way, where it's like material and I feel it. I know some people like to have a copy like digitally, and for that I think Canva is really great, to curate a bunch of photos and put them on a collage, and that way you can have them on your phone screensaver, and that's a good way to look at it every day. And I find just one, getting clear on what it is that you want for yourself or goal, and you're allowed to have wants. You don't have to be afraid or ashamed. Like these are your own personal wants and desires. They're not for anybody else to criticize or to say like, oh, that's a big goal, or are you sure? Or maybe you should find something a little bit slower. Dream big and put it all out there, because even once you're clear, you're going to start making a little bit more decisions that optimize and kind of like flow towards your vision. So even if you hit it a small amount, that is so much better than not having any direction at all. And then a whole year has passed before you know it. And you're like, like I'm in the same kind of position where I feel a little lost, or I feel a little bit unsure. So I think just putting it on pen and paper or photo to paper of what you want can be extremely beneficial. And I always like to have my vision board in a place where I can see it. and connect with it every day. And sometimes I'll just sit and put music and close my eyes and picture what would my life be if I truly had that. And sometimes you'll find that like little resistances come up, and I actually write those down so that I know where I kind of have this little shadow part of me or this little voice saying like, oh, you can't do that, or that's too big of a dream, or like just be happy where you're at and be grateful. And I'll just note those down so that I know that they're there, and I don't try to push them away with like overly positive thinking, because I know we're told like positive, 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 and we kind of try to like shut out any negativity around that. Though learning to embrace that side of you, because it is there, that thought is there, is very beneficial. So I just write it down and make a note of it. And then I keep visualizing how it would feel if I have accomplished those things that are on my vision board. Like, how would it feel if I have that home? How would it feel if I'm on that vacation and on that trip with my partner or with my friends? Like, the fun that we're going to really have, and embody that. And then I kind of go into a, who would I have to be? Like, what is my state of being? Like, what version of Noya do I have to be to have that? Like, what energy do I have to harness? Like, what are my connections and relationships with people going to look like? What is my relationship with Caviar Care and Caviar Skin Clinic going to look like? Of course, if I have a big goal with Caviar Skin Clinic, I know that I'm going to have to dedicate some time towards that, or I'm going to have to collaborate and delegate and get people to help with that. So it makes it much easier to see the next step. Because for some people, and for me, I am such a big dreamer. I kind of go from like 0 to 100, and it can be a lot because, it's like, how are you going to get from 0 to 100? For me, having the big end goal and like this big dream is very motivating and inspirational for me. And that's actually the vision that keeps me going. For some people, that might cause a lot of anxiety and frustration, that they're like, oh my God, it's too big. It's too much of an undertaking. And then you kind of get this like paralysis of just too much. And for that, you can work in kind of small steps. Have your dream and then work backwards. If this is my vision up here, what am I going to look like 6 months before that vision? And what am I going to look like 6 months before that? And do it for 5 years, or whenever you expect that you want that vision to happen, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and work backwards into creating those goals for yourself, and make those like 1 to 3 practical things that you can do, and keep working backwards. So, for example, we can all say a lot of us have the desire to buy a home. And I mean, this white picket fence dream has died with some of us just in Vancouver, with real estate being so expensive. But say I would like to own a home. What's the realistic area that I would want to be in? And what does that cost look like? Okay, from that, what is that 20% down going to look like? And how am I going to achieve that? Okay, well, can I work more hours, or do I want to? Is that the vision I have? So maybe not. Do I need to do something that's more product oriented, where you can make sales globally and like 24/7, and you don't necessarily have to be at an office? And you can kind of slowly work backwards into, what version of yourself do you have to evolve and grow into to get to where you want to be? And sometimes breaking down your goals into those incremental things, where you actually like have your big goal then work backwards, can really help, because you keep working backwards until it becomes a small stepping stone. Then at least you can see step 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to your goal. And one book that I read while I was in naturopathic medical school that I thought was really great, I believe it was called Never Eat Alone. And I can't remember who the author was, but I really liked the concept of it, because I feel I am an outgoing person and I like to be social. So if that can help engage you and propel you forward, then great. And that's kind of one of the reasons I started this podcast, Caviar Conversations, is because I find, we get so busy and bogged down with work, and I actually enjoy having these types of conversations with people. So I thought, what a better way than to have a platform where you can have engaging conversations with other thought leaders and entrepreneurs and other people in the industry, and even friends and things, people that are the influence around you who you've learned from. And in this book, they teach you how to go from the big goal and then dissect it like every 3 months back or so. And I found that made it very digestible, because then what do I want and how I'm going to get there. And it was a very inspirational book. I find the one that I'm reading now, and I'm always reading, I do spend 10 to 15 minutes a day reading. That's kind of like my morning coffee ritual. Well, the home is still quiet and everybody else is sleeping. And I will spend a little bit of time reading. So right now, as I mentioned before when talking with Storai, is I'm reading 10x is easier than 2x. And the concept of this book, which I really like, it's like, what is your main goal? Like, what is your craziest goal, even if you think it's impossible? Because to achieve a 2x, so say you want to like double your revenue. There is probably dozens of ways you can double your revenue, and you don't know which one's going to be the most effective or which one's going to be the most or least amount of work. But if you're trying to 10x, it's such a crazy goal. There's really only one or two ways that you can 10x, because you can come up with 20 ideas. 19 of them aren't going to work. They'll only get you 2x. So it kind of pushes you to find like what's going to be the most effective push that you need to achieve 10x. And to think about it with things from this perspective was actually interesting, because I feel like we're always like, and I've had mentors tell me who were like more financial mentors, like, okay, strive for 10% growth a year. So of course, there's a lot of ways you can achieve that, increasing your prices, adding a new product or service. But when you're like, okay, how do I 10x? You're like, okay, this goal is so crazy. I'm going to have to come up with something like totally revolutionary or creative to get there. And usually you'll only come up with one or two ideas. So I find this notion like super interesting, and I'm reading the book. So I'll kind of go through, I'll dive into a few kind of ideas or strategies, and I'm kind of implementing a few things right now, and I'll share that. But I would love to totally hear what your guys' New Year's resolutions are, and do you guys do vision boards, and what does that look like? Is it journaling, creating images and graphics? Let me know. I would absolutely like love to hear from you guys. And I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much, and thank you so much for those of you that have tuned in and listened. We have just started in the last few months with Caviar Conversations, and it has been so fun for me. So I hope it's been as much fun for you. And I would love it if you could show your support by liking and subscribing or following. It would mean so much to me. So thank you guys, and stay tuned for the next episode of Caviar Conversations.